What if you could engage more with God when designing your legacy? This lovely Friday, I have the pleasure to introduce you to Wendy Cunningham. She lives on 84 acres in the middle of Tennessee. So, aside from writing her latest book and podcasting, Wendy also is an entrepreneur, a wife, and a homeschool mom of three. Originally an atheist, she critically thought her way to faith. So, welcome today. My name is Angelina Carleton. I'm the hostess to the Design Your Legacy podcast and the founder to Legacy Planning, a boutique coaching and advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, but international in those I coach. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you for having me.
So, and we're going to have an exciting conversation today, and we're going to dive deep into some spiritual topics.
I love it. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, where you were an atheist. So, can you give perspective to what that moment was like, what you were thinking?
Sure. Yeah. To say that I was an atheist really is just a foundational, or rather a lack of a foundational way of viewing the world, right? So it wasn't so much a moment, but just an experience of growing up. My grandmother was an atheist and my mom was, and so I was, right? And it's not, it's not the same as having a faith, because I think when you have a faith, whatever that faith is, it is more a part of the conversation. And atheism is actually a lack of a conversation about faith. And so I didn't really know that there was something I was supposed to be searching for or knowing about or learning about or engaging with at all until I met my now husband, who was a Christian, and he started to just push back on some of the things I believed and get me to, explore how I got to where I was. Why did I believe these things, and how had I come to this point? To your point of, okay, I find myself as an atheist in my early 20s. How did I get there?
Yeah, why was God not real?
Right. Yeah. So, I think when you're never exposed to a creation account, and growing up in Northern California in public schools, I never stepped foot inside a church. I remember going to one wedding that was in a church when I was growing up. So I knew that people believed in God, and I understood why they would believe that, but I was taught about the Big Bang and about evolution. And so I just had a scientific, air quote, understanding of where we came from. And that was good enough for me, because I really didn't have any other conflicting narrative to try to reconcile. And so, when you're growing up, I didn't really care. I didn't care too much about where we came from. And so when someone explained to me in school that this is the deal and we all evolved and blah, 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 I was like, sounds good. Okay. God's not real. And, the people I respect, my family, my peer group, they don't believe. So anytime it was brought up anywhere in my life, it was easy to just roll my eyes and go, oh, those people just don't understand like science. And so they have like a magical man in the sky. It just seemed silly and seemed unrealistic.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to point out is Oprah used to have, and this is not a dig on Oprah, just to have that disclaimer. Oprah used to have an article at the end of her magazine called What I Know for Sure. And what I thought was interesting is the title of your book, I think, was What If I'm Wrong? So there's a perspective of certainty, and then you came in with a perspective of curiosity and exploration.
That's good. So I'll correct you. It's what if you're wrong?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which was based off of the question that my husband asked me, right? And so I'm then in turn asking the reader of my book, what if you're wrong?
Yeah.
And that doesn't assume that you are, right? It doesn't assume that I know you're wrong, I'm right. It is just, again, an opportunity for you to engage in the journey, right? Engage in the journey of seeking the truth. I don't want to say your truth, because in certain instances, there is only the truth, And so, like there is, as an example, there is an answer to the question, is there a God? It's a yes or a no question. There is a true answer to that question. So that's what I mean when I say the truth, not your truth, right? But yeah, that was the concept behind the book, was just challenging people to re-examine
And reflect.
why do you believe in certain areas? Maybe not the whole picture is wrong, but maybe you're wrong over here, or maybe there's things that are in conflict that you haven't taken the time to reconcile and figure out.
Yeah, I also just wanted to point out that I think it's really good that you are willing to examine your beliefs at that moment, because some people are so tied to their ego that they will fight for their beliefs regardless of what they are. And I think it takes someone that's willing to say that the truth is more important than them being right.
Well, I wish I could give myself that full credit of that compliment, but I will be honest and tell you that the only reason I was really willing to go back and reflect was because I thought for sure I was right. And so
You were going to prove your husband wrong.
that's exactly right. I really was like, I'm going to go back and research all of these things I know are true. And I'm going to bring in this really exceptional like presentation of why I'm right. And that's where stuff started to fall apart. For me, it was as I began to like, really, again, re-engage in some of these thoughts and questions that I hadn't really thought about since I was a teenager or in school. When I started to look at it through an adult lens, I thought, oh man, gosh, that doesn't really add up the same way it did when I was younger, or some of the same problems I had with God also existed with there not being a God. And so I just had to I realized very quickly, oh, this is unraveling. But to your point, in the end of the day, I did come to the place where I desired to know what was true more than I desired to be right. I did want to know what was true, but it all started, to be fair, with my ego and my pride absolutely propelling me to prove myself right and embarrass my husband.
Oh, pride.
Absolutely.
Why do you think others are there right now in the place of thinking that there's no God, given today's volatile world? Or like, do you have any insights that maybe like looking back, you could say, I can relate to maybe where they were or are?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a concerted and intentional effort to remove God from the equation. And to believe in God means there's an accountability that's different, that's eternal. And we want to reject that. We do not, and I don't mean, I'm being general. I'm sure some people don't feel this way, but it's so much easier to think that the pursuit of my own happiness, the pursuit of my own success, the pursuit of my own will is all I need to worry about. It is much more challenging to think there could be a will and a purpose that I need to seek out that isn't just of my own selfish nature, my own selfish desire. So it's really easy. The sin nature is already in us to just want to reject being accountable to anybody. We want to just be able to live our life the way that we want to. And that includes absolute cultural norms like sex outside of marriage, like, recreational drug use or drinking, or any of these things that are pleasure seeking life, which we all do. I'm not trying to be judgmental at all. Those are preferable to falling under what we sometimes view as laws or rules or legalism, or, so it's
The law. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's easy, it's natural to want to reject that, but also the world makes it really easy because, if you go, I don't mean to get too spiritual, but if you go into the word of God, it talks about the enemy is here. He's doing his work to try to not persuade you to believe in the devil. The devil does not want to be worshiped, yet he wants you to just not believe in anything. That would be his preference, because then he wins by default, right? Because the way into heaven, according to the Bible, is through belief and submission to Jesus as your Lord and Savior, all the things, right? So if he can just get you to not do that, then he wins by default. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's interesting. I hadn't made the connection before. And again, I'm not pushing Christianity in this podcast episode. I just want to make that clear. So it's interesting. One of the sayings we have at Legacy Planning is what apathy is doing to your legacy is just not right. And now, given what you said, it's multidimensional. Keep going.
Very, very interesting. Yeah. But again, if you were raised in the public school system, you're not going to learn about creation.
Mhm.
Uh, you you're going to be given like a set or an explanation of where we came from that doesn't include God. So if you want to, you can grab a hold of that and never go back and question it. So it's very easy to, I mean, prayers removed from school, long ago. It's being taken out of culture. And, in the 80s, America was like 85% Christian, and now we're at 65% Christian. But honestly, I'm not sure what one of those 65% would actually define Christianity as. I'm sure we would have varying definitions of what Christianity is at this point. So it's falling out of culture. It used to be very embedded and now it isn't. So it's very easy to find yourself without any sort of foundation in Christian values.
Interesting. Yeah. Why do you think it helps to talk to God, about God, or faith, especially given today's tragedies?
Sure. Well, if you believe in a higher power, if you believe in a creator God who is good, and this is hard, this is all challenging, right? And these are big, giant philosophical questions that each one of them we could talk about for an hour, but if you believe there is a God, and if you believe he's a good God, then everything else is given a level of purpose. Everything else is instructive. You also can have confidence. Like I know in my personal experience that as I look through the lens of what's happening in our country and in our world, sometimes it's really overwhelming and feels really
Demoralizing?
yes. And I just feel really pessimistic. Like, what could I even do to change anything? How do I even have an impact on all of this?
Helpless.
Helpless,
Yeah.
absolutely. But if you believe in a God who is sovereign, which means he authors or allows everything for his plan, then you can go, okay, all of this is playing out according to his plan. Nothing catches him off guard. And that gives you a peace that allows you to just stay in your lane and do the things that he's calling you to do, and bring joy in the ways that you can bring joy, and build legacy in the way that you can build legacy. But you have a peace knowing there is a God and I'm not him, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, I don't have to be responsible for all that.
yeah,
I don't have to put it
fix-
all on my shoulders.
exactly.
Yeah, one of the things I wrote down is like thinking about like the stress from the day-to-day living, how much it can affect our mind-body connection, and having faith can I can opine. I think it adds to better mental health, because it's not like what's eating Gilbert grape.
Right.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of studies about prayer in all sects of religion, just in the meditation almost of just getting into a quiet place. How often do we do that intentionally?
Oh,
Get
yeah.
into a quiet place to just quiet your mind and reflect on just that, what I said, there is a God and I am not him. Like, okay.
Yeah.
The peace that brings, the perspective that brings, it takes off a tremendous amount of burden. And I know as I've walked in my faith journey, which I like to think I'm growing in maturity all the time in my faith walk, even the financial elements, like where you feel like it is up to me to provide and to save and to make sure I have a college fund for each of my children, and got my retirement, and
Pressure.
oh yeah, it's just a tremendous amount of pressure. And the Bible says that he's my provider. I don't have to strive in the natural. He's going to open every door in the right time, in the right season for me to walk through, and I can have faith in that. And I doesn't mean I just sit back and do nothing.
Right.
It means that, okay, a closed door is not the end. It is just a redirection. So again, it just gives you perspective, and it gives you a peace that I don't think the world offers.
Yeah. And to trust in something that's bigger than ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very nice to think, like, for instance, well, my success is because of me. And a part of that can be true because we take the action, we get off,
Yep.
and we work for it. But I don't think it is like what I call the glorification of the negative ego, of like, let me pat myself on the back. It was all me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you want the listeners to know, especially those under age 40 that make up, I would say, about 80% of who listens to this podcast?
Oh gosh. again, just speaking through my own perspective and lens, and, I do want to be respectful that I know there's a lot of beliefs and backgrounds that are probably here, but that my hope is that we are intentional about ourselves and the people who are coming behind us being recentered on what is true. And there is a movement here in our world today, kind of alluded to it earlier, that whatever you want to be true is true. And your truth can be different than another person's truth. And, I argue in my book that there is absolute truth, which is to say there is an absolute, right? And even to say there is no absolute truth is in itself an absolute truth. So you can't even make that argument, right, without it being self-fulfilling. So if there is an absolute truth about God, and we seek to know that answer, I think that's important, because there are people coming behind us, and we have become culturally, as a society, really poor at articulating our own opinions and thoughts and feelings. And we regurgitate a lot of headlines. And this I learned from my own experience coming to faith, which happened over years, mind you. This wasn't like one really excellent conversation and I was convinced, not even kind of, sort of. But when my husband was challenging me, and when I didn't have a good answer, I resorted to attacks or emotional rhetoric.
Oh, going on the offense.
Calling names, or, my goal was, yes, exactly. And what do we see on social media again and again? A failure to articulate your own thoughts. And you're just, when you get into a debate, I see it just unravel so quickly where, well, you're this and that. And, it's like name calling, and we
character assassinations.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, that doesn't serve anybody, right? That doesn't serve anybody. We need to be able to go back to engaging in debate with one another, recognizing that we can learn from everyone around us, even people we disagree with. We may agree to disagree at the end, but we most certainly walk away from these conversations with shifted perspectives, more knowledge, and we are a culture of a tremendous amount of education, a tremendous amount of knowledge, and very little wisdom, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. You might not be the only one who thinks that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Wisdom is the ability to act on your understanding. Right. And sometimes we have knowledge, but we don't have understanding. Without understanding, you can't have wisdom. So it's just, we're seeing it all crumble apart, and we're seeing the most depressed and anxious generation that has ever seen the face of earth, right? Why is that?
You're talking about today's youth.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's sad. Something broke, something's broken in the way that breaking. Absolutely.
Yeah. Which is one of the reasons why I'm going to echo something I say on my podcast in almost every episode about positive role models. So every voice that comes on here is just a positive source of inspiration and education for those that are willing to open their ears and hear. Yeah. Because
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not going to touch politics, but how do you see current events today from your perspective?
It's hard to, again, Christianity is a foundation that allows for guiding principles. Atheism is a lack of a foundation, which has a lack of guiding principles, right? And I mean to say, like, a guiding principle would be, that you're supposed to save sex till marriage. That's a guiding principle, right?
Okay.
Atheist, I didn't have that principle. And so I didn't do that, right? Like, that wasn't because I went with whatever the world says, whatever culture says, and experienced a lot of trauma just in my own personal experience because of that, right? So I think that that's what we're seeing around us a lot is, again, the pursuit of your happiness in the moment. And, liberty is not just the pursuit of doing whatever brings you joy in the moment. Liberty is actually putting boundaries around that are going to serve you and protect you. It's, if we all just did whatever we wanted to do in the moment, it would be absolute anarchy and chaos. So we know that you can't live in a society just doing whatever you want to do to bring yourself joy. That is not the motivator. And yet
Bunch of
That's
heathens. Go ahead. Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
it seems like the world is trying to communicate with us. Like, do whatever you want. And like, there's a solution for every consequence. There's a pill for that. There's a this for that. There's a procedure for that. Like, just do what makes you happy. And then we'll fix the consequence if it arises. Whereas I'm like, gosh, if we could get back to some of these guiding principles, the consequence, because we'd be, owning our own integrity and looking at our own pursuit a little bit differently with a little bit more longevity, which is where legacy comes in, right? You can't build legacy in 5 minutes. Legacy is built intentionally over time.
And with awareness and consciousness and
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So how does your faith strengthen you? Because I think that's one of the things that doesn't always get talked about.
Well, I think again, over time, as you can, there would be someone who might be listening to this that says, thinks, I've been a Christian my whole life and I don't have peace. I've been a Christian my whole life and I don't have what she's talking about, this confidence that I know what's true.
The calm is the inner peace. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And that comes from engaging in, it's a journey. It's not like, okay, I'm a Christian, so the journey has ended. I've arrived. Christ came so that we could have life and life abundant, life on this side, not just so we could have eternity. Mm-hmm. That's the, end goal, of course, is like eternity, but he also came so that we could have abundant life on this side of eternity. And a lot of Christians get to the place of salvation, but they don't get to the place of abundance on this side of eternity. Oh. And so I feel that that's where my faith has been just so tremendous as I continue to engage, as I continue to know or learn, I should say, the character of God and just engage further in my own relationship, intimacy with God. I am strengthened more and more. I'm affirmed more and more. I'm calmed more and more. I have more and more peace. I have better and better answers. I can have better and better conversations with my children or with my husband. I'm feeling more conviction about what I should do and what I shouldn't do. Again, those guiding principles are giving me direction and helping me avoid pain, avoid the pitfalls of, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. I don't know if you know anything about the Enneagram.
A little bit. Yeah.
That's the achiever. So okay. My sin, if you will, is achiever. I am just a striver and I will put it all on. And that is where I find accidentally where I will put value and worth is only if I'm achieving at a high level, then I'm valuable. If I'm not achieving at a high level, I'm not valuable. That's a lie and not true. But
that's so prevalent.
It's totally prevalent, especially
startup founders, entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Yeah, family business members, investors.
Yeah. So I have to break that off and go, that's not who I am. It's not, I'm still valuable if I'm not producing, if my business is not doing well. I'm an entrepreneur. My husband's an entrepreneur. So we've walked this out in that space for years, so that's again, bringing me back to my faith tells me who I am. So I don't have to strive in the natural to be valuable. I'm already valuable. And it's working from a place of value as opposed to for a place of value.
Oh, that's deep. There's a distinction right there. So to someone in the world, that could be very confusing. How can you have such healthy self-esteem when it doesn't make sense on the world standards?
Sure. And it's not perfect and it's not always, it's a journey because I don't always feel confident. I don't always feel that way, but that's the truth. That's the guiding principle. So when I'm feeling stressed or anxious, or I have to remind myself to go back and reevaluate, why am I feeling these things? Oh, it's because I'm putting my value over here and I don't need to put my value over there. Actually, it's putting more strain on my ability to build my business well, because I'm again, working for worth, not from worth. So I'm putting too much stress on clients. I'm putting too much strain on the relationships I'm trying to build and honor. And so it just helps me shift back. But again, I get out of whack all the time. It's not to say I've perfectly managed this. That's not it at all. It's a journey for sure.
Yeah. Would you speak into your favorite verse just for a moment and I will move on to the next question?
Yeah, absolutely. So my favorite verse is Philippians. Let me just pull it up so I read it correctly, but Philippians 1:6. I have it here. And this just comes to from my journey. So it's being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus Christ. And that again, just reminds me that I don't have to do it. He began the work. He is sustaining the work. He completes the work. It takes all the pressure off of me to create my own value and create. I think that's so, it's so grounding for me, especially with my personality. It's so important for me to stay anchored in, he is doing the work. I just have to show up. I just have to show up. I just have to continue to say, what do you have? What do you have for me? This door that closed, you know, what's next for me? Which direction am I supposed to be going in? Just, you know, being flexible
and trusting.
Big.
So since this is a Designing Your Legacy podcast, how did and does atheism as well as Christianity influence how you define and or develop your legacy?
Yeah. Gosh, well, we could get really rudimentary here. I remember having conversations with my grandmother as she was passing away, which is really strange to watch. So my grandmother, who was the atheist, the matriarch of our family, my rock in so many ways, she was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a terrible thing to watch happen to a person. And she told me before she was sick that she believed the reason why there's faith, why Christianity exists, is because man made it to help you get through hard times, challenging moments in life, which is basically what we've been talking up to this point about, that faith does offer you that. Well, she saw that as an artificial reality.
Okay.
And then the person I'm meant to put that into action with is that very gal, my grandmother. So as she is passing away, I'm feeling that immense need to have an understanding of, is there something beyond this? I sure want to believe there's something beyond this life. But, you know, she's telling me there isn't. She's telling me you just go to the dirt. You just go to the dirt. And it was just the strangest thing to watch someone go to the dirt, so to speak, you know, just be completely content and fine and have no compulsion to re-examine, reflect. Am I right about this? Is there a piece missing here? Should I go back and think about this again? She was like, absolutely not. I'm going to the dirt. You know, so in terms of legacy, what is the point, Grandma, that you were here for 70 years and now in the dirt? Like, what is the point of that? You know, because my kids don't know you. So you're already gone in terms of like the, you know, any active memory. Like eventually I'm going to be passed away and my kids won't have any memory of you and you'll be gone and it'll be done, you know?
Yeah.
Or we're talking about money. Like, what are we talking about? Right. So I just think that was so strange. And that really did inform at the time, it did anchor me further into atheism because I recognized, oh, she's right. I do want to believe there's something else. Just because I want to believe there's something else doesn't mean there is something else. You know, that was kind of my thought at that time. I was 18 when she passed away. So yeah, just that, I feel like Christianity gives me so much more thinking about an eternal life and a legacy for eternity. So it's not just about what I do in the natural. What I do in the natural absolutely transcends to the eternal. So we're talking about a legacy on earth for generations to come, but I'm also, as a Christian, thinking about a legacy in eternity. Whose soul, not just life did I touch, whose soul did I touch while I was here that's going to end up in eternity? Who can I encourage to, again, engage with God, engage in faith, engage in the pursuit of truth, right? To engage in the pursuit of wisdom. Because if I can do that here in the natural, I'm making an eternal legacy. And the Bible calls that treasures in heaven, you know, like I'm stacking treasures in heaven.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
It does. And one of the things I found so interesting is you were so close to your grandmother that in some ways I had wondered if you felt like you were betraying her to choose a different belief system.
Yes.
That's even a courage and a conversation in itself, because a lot of families will be like, well, if you don't believe what I believe, you know, you're out, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, she was already passed away by the time I was negotiating these things in my brain.
Okay.
So, you know, that makes it even more complicated, because I wasn't just worried about her rolling her eyes at me. I was worried about, where is her soul?
Interesting.
You know,
Yeah.
which is really hard to think about. Faith is an individual walk. My faith does not save my children, which is really hard as a parent, as a Christian parent. I would love to just like get them in, based on like, I believe enough, they can come, but I have to, and not just tell them. This isn't about me telling them things that I hope that they believe, but doing what my husband did for me, which is, let me ask you questions. Let me send you on a pursuit of truth.
Yeah. One of the things you pointed out was that your husband showed it to you. In other words, he walked it. It wasn't just like, well, do as I say, but not as I do.
No, he really exemplified a lot of those Christian values and principles in the way that he lived his life, which made him stand out as so different than anyone I knew. And it wasn't just me. I mean, he was voted most likely to change the world in high school. Like, he's just that guy that people just, there's something different about you, so he does a really good job of doing that and being that. But yeah, he didn't tell me, Wendy, you're wrong about this. Let me tell you what's true about Jesus. Let me tell you there is a God. He didn't tell me a thing.
He didn't
He
preach at
asked
you.
me, no. He
Yeah.
asked, why do you believe what you believe? Could you have been created? Why do you think you couldn't have been created? He made me articulate my own thoughts, which is
Oh,
we should do so much more of that, guys. We would get so much farther in conversation and just richness of conversation if we
yeah.
really cared about the other person instead of just telling them what we think.
Yeah. Absolutely. Number one, it's beyond news, sports, and weather, but also it's that intimacy of like caring what the other person actually thinks and caring enough to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you think God can inspire us or help us with our legacy planning?
Gosh, he has a plan. Again, this is all this is all going back to the word of God. And I just have to disclaimer and say that I know if this is not where you're at, this might just sound ridiculous. Because I remember thinking, whenever you quote the word of God, it's like you're quoting the Little Mermaid. It has just absolutely no authority to me, so I
And that's how
recognize
some
that.
people are going to see it
Absolutely.
until they
But
come to that place of pure emptiness. But keep going.
in my answering of that question, the word of God tells us that he has numbered our days. He has a plan. His plans are above our plans. His thoughts are above our thoughts. So he has a plan for us to operate in our highest, the way we were designed to operate, the way that we were, the life that we were designed to live. Like, he has a plan. And our goal as Christians is to align ourselves as much as we possibly can with what that is the first time. Because we're going to get off track. We're going to do it our way. We're going to learn the hard way. Bad things are going to happen. This is a fallen world. It's not perfect, not even for the Christians, right? It's rocky and bumpy. But if we can take those moments to realign and instead of seeing a closed door as the absolute end of the road, I've heard it put this way: don't put a period where God puts a comma, right?
Mm,
Like,
mm,
no, this is not the end. I'm redirecting you. I'm showing you that this is the better plan. I grew up, I was 15 years in the theater. I thought I was going to be an actor. I was going to marry Justin Timberlake. That was going to be my thing. Didn't go that way. And for a while, I felt really lost because that's who I was for so long.
in your identity and worth.
Yes, I just
Yeah.
could not. And this was before I was a believer, so I didn't have all this hope. I just felt like, I don't know what else to be. I don't know who else. Like, I've been doing this since I was 8.
It's all I know.
It's all I know.
Yeah.
And I had a moment, and the thing, if I were to define the things that I loved about performing, it was, getting people to think deeply about things, shifting their perspective, being well known for being good at something, right? Like, these were some of the things I loved about performing. And there was a moment when I was, had gone into entrepreneurship and I had succeeded in my field, and I was on stage doing a training, and I just had this revelation where God showed me, remember how you loved changing people's perspective, making them think differently, encouraging them, being good at something. Look, I've fulfilled all of those desires of your heart, just not in the way you thought. And
Yeah.
so those are the moments where it's like, oh my gosh, if I had it my way, I would have still been poor as can be, trying to push this thing I thought I was or thought I was supposed to do. Instead, God just redirected me, but still fulfilled all the same things, just in a completely different way, a way I would have never dreamed that's how I was going to be walking out my life, you know? So that's my best answer to that question.
Lovely, lovely. It's very honest and real. Thank you. So what does the word legacy mean to you and how you define it beyond a will or legal documents, governance documents?
Yeah, it's so that matters so little to me these days.
The will or the governance documents or
All of those things, you know, because I think, and I don't mean to say I don't have them. Of course I have all those things, but I'm like, that used to be, you know, I was very, very worried for a long time about the 401k and saving for college and, you know, getting all the T's and the I's
eyes.
dotted and
Yeah, yeah,
everything.
yeah.
And even I would say this is a blessing for me personally of the last 2 years of chaos in the world and things pivoting and you just not being able to foresee, like, I don't think any of us foresaw the pivots of 2020, you know. And it is, if you did foresee that, then you know we've got a calling for you. But I really took that as, gosh, you could, and I got a kind of precursor view of this when I was younger, starting my entrepreneur, you know, journey in late 2008, early 2009, when I was watching my mom, who had done all the things. She got the job. She stayed at the job for 30 years. She had the retirement. She had the big home, and she lost it all like in a year.
Yeah, and life will do that.
The 401k. I mean, that's going to happen, right? And that gave me a totally different perspective. And then 2020 re-anchored that perspective that we don't know what any of the dollar bills or the house I have now, or, I mean, we live on 84 acres. My hope and prayer is that this is part of our family for generations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I always do this with my plans. Like, here's my plans, but like, if you got a better plan, I'm totally down for that, Lord, you know, like,
Try not to laugh at my plans, God. Keep going.
yeah. Am I doing it right? I have plans and hopes, but I can't really control what's going to happen in this world. And I don't want to put all of my legacy in this box that can be taken, that can be broken, that can be, you know, the world can shift on a dime, and all of that doesn't matter anymore. So I think of legacy, again, like I said, more eternal. I think of legacy as, if I can help my children avoid the pitfalls that I fell into, or if I can help my children avoid the things that I see in culture, like we were talking about, if you can anchor into truth, you know, my children can then have these guiding foundations that are going to be countercultural. I mean, there's no question to, we keep using this example, or I do, of saving yourself till marriage. That's countercultural. That's going to be wildly strange, you know, to my kids' peer groups, if that's what they choose. But that's my hope, is that I'm instilling in them the desire to honor God with their life. And that to me is more important than dollar bills. And, you know, to me, that's a legacy that is eternal. That is a legacy that lasts beyond what you're doing or what you're collecting up in the natural. And I wrote this book, and I'm writing a devotional, and one of my friends said, this book that you wrote about your testimony, this is your legacy for generations, you know? And I thought, that's exactly it. My testimony of how I found the Lord is going to be hopefully read by all the generations, you know, as long as it, because that'll outlast me, you know. That's a story that they can read, and I can share my wisdom and my pitfalls and all the things, and hopefully give them direction to honor God with their life.
Yeah. As the sun is setting behind me, one of the things I wanted to highlight is, unless there's an inciting event, whether it's internal or external, I think that we rarely think about our legacy or planning it in the now, compared to procrastinating it or just allowing it to be by default. Yeah. And I think a part of it is that we don't know that we have the personal agency to think about it. Like, I've shared this on previous podcasts. I've got a great grandfather. His name was Herbert Carleton. He was a hugely successful insurance broker in the Great Depression time. He had multiple Cadillacs, multiple homes, but he never wrote me a letter, like regarding the story of his life, like you just talked about. Like, he didn't write down like the top 10 lessons in life or business, like none of that. But I think a part of it was that he didn't know to do it. He didn't know to set aside a weekend, or to think that somebody would want to hear it or would be curious.
Yeah. I mean, that's again, so focused on the here and now, so focused on ourselves and and again, worth. It's only worth if somebody tells me this is, am I doing it right? Am I doing good? And, I think my parents, they put on me, and this is not a complaint, but you go to college. I was of the generation that you go to college, whether you know what you're doing or not, you just go, that's what you do. And so I did that. And everyone I know did that. And I want to break that off. And I'm intentional about, I don't want to just pass down children, you need to do this, or you need to live up to this, or you need to be a part of my expectation. I'm like, it doesn't really matter what I think about your life. I want you to find what you're meant to do here on earth,
Yeah.
So I mentioned that before about just the pressure generational wealth sometimes can, put on children to rise to that expectation. And, my husband and I grew up in Northern California, where there was a lot of farms that, my peer groups, they stood to inherit these tremendous farms that there's no way that I was going to buy a farm of that size. Right. With the way that real estate was in California when I was coming into adulthood, and I didn't have a family that was going to pass that on to me. So I was kind of free of, okay, well, I know I'm not going to be a farmer, but my peers were like, I have to be a farmer. That is what I have to do because my dad has 1,000 acres and like, that's what we do, like what a burden,
Yeah, it's interesting, the conditioning that comes with whether you're expected to go to college and have 2.5 children and the white picket fence and then life happens and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't get the guide for knowing, where's the memo, the white paper. Yeah, what do you mean something different was going to show up on my door? Right. Yeah. What values do you say that you get to honor by developing your legacy and staying in integrity to the vision that you hold in your heart and soul?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, one that we probably could all stand to reflect on more. I mean, if you ask somebody, just a random person, what are your core values? I think they'd have a hard time answering that question. For me, absolutely faith, family, freedom is a big one. And that includes like the ability to live flexibly. So that does include a financial picture and all of those things, that's kind of complex. And authenticity and humor. Like those are my 5 core values. Like that's, I've thought about that a lot. Like those are the things that kind of define me and where I prioritize my time, where I prioritize my, I've been attacked by all the bugs.
Yeah, I keep going. Where you prioritize. Yeah.
Yeah, it just informs me, when I have the decision of, okay, does my kids' sports come over church? No, because faith is before, faith is at the top of our priorities. Does my work interfere with whether or not I'm going to be at my kids' games? No, because family is prioritized over that, so like it informs me as to where I'm going to give my time, give my intentionality. Of course, there's times I'm going to have to miss a game or so, it's not a hard, it's just, it gives me information of where to prioritize. And that is legacy. My kids are going to remember I was there. My kids are going to remember I was intentional with being with them. And, I think that absolutely your values should and do inform the legacy, whether you intentionally choose the values or the values choose you, because that's going to happen. You're going to be assigned. And so many of us are assigned our work is our number one value. And maybe that's not what we would choose for ourselves, but that's where all of our priority goes. That's where all of and this, again, not being judgmental, but then you look back on life and go, man, I should have been at more games. I should have, like, how come I didn't do that? Well, we didn't intentionalize that.
Well, I think the obsession with survival is based in fear. And if somebody can shift it to faith, whatever that faith is, I think that then just gives their life balance, but it also gives their life meaning, connection, and all that depth. Because if somebody is just chasing on the rat wheel, it'll just burn them out. I was listening to something the other day regarding technology, and if we can't disconnect from technology and realize that there's an equal value to rest, recovery, and relaxation, we are just burning our batteries out regarding our life force energy.
Oh yeah. It's funny. I remember during 2020 was a fun year for everybody, but there was something that happened with my company, and I had to go through however long I had been on social media, which at that point was, I don't know, 13 years or something. And I had to look at every single thing I had ever posted to make sure it was compliant. And it meant that I was staring at my phone for hours on end in a panicked urgency, because I needed to purge anything that wasn't legally compliant, or, it was one of those
fix it.
high stress situations. And I literally could feel, if I stare at this phone one more minute, I'm actually going to have a full-blown anxiety attack. Like I could sense it is the staring at this thing. Like I have to get down. I've got to step away from this screen because it is really amping my anxiety through the roof. And just taking a break and laughing with my girlfriends for a little bit, then I was refreshed, to your point. And I was like, okay, now I'm ready to go back at it. But yes, man, it just sucks. It sucks it all out of us.
Yeah, well, it hijacks our nervous system also, but that's another conversation for another day.
Absolutely.
How are you developing your legacy, and or what gets in the way of executing your legacy? Because we're still human, and we don't get a magic wand just because we.
You said it. Fear so frequently hijacks the whole thing. And you mentioned fear over faith, or faith over fear, and I actually had a whole training I did on that concept, that fear is believing the negative. What if this fails? What if I don't make enough money? What if the business goes under? What if blah, blah, blah. And faith is believing the positive hypothetical, which is, what if I'm successful at this? What if this goes through? What if the client says yes? What if this is, a great meeting? Both scenarios are entirely hypothetical, all of it. It's all in the future. It doesn't yet exist. None of these consequences are real. And yet, for some reason, we default in our brain to, what if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't work? And that hijacks our ability to show up well. That hijacks our ability to prioritize. If you're in fear, what if this doesn't work? What if the business collapses? How are you going to intentionally sit there and watch your kids play a baseball game, or engage with them and take time to go on vacation when you're in fear, 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 fear? So I would say, and again, this is me saying, I recognize this in my own life, right? This is not I'm an authority and this is my experience. Absolutely. And this world is piping hot with fear right now. There's a million things to wonder about and research and feel uncertain about. So that's real. That's the big hijacker for me, for sure. Also just doubt can be, I actually read something that doubt steals more dreams than fear ever could. Isn't that good?
Yeah.
Gosh, sometimes just doubting if you even have what it takes stops you from trying. It's not even fear.
Those limiting beliefs can become manifested in reality if you don't. Yeah.
So I think fear and doubt drive priorities, and those may not be the priorities you would have intentionally chosen for your legacy. So to answer your question, I anchor into those values, my faith, my family, authenticity, showing up the way that I am, not, and that's been a struggle too in this world that wants you, if you vote this way, then you are this person. Or if you, post something like this, then you think all of these other things. Like, we're in a world where you're assigned a whole lot of stuff.
And it becomes one-dimensional.
It totally does. And so it's really hard right now to show up authentically and go, you know what, that's me, but this is also me. These things can coexist. I can think these things at the same time. An example of that would be when I first came to know the Lord, one of my dear friends, I was an actor for a long time, who's gay, called me and said, oh, I know now you hate gay people. I was like, whoa, what? Like, what are you talking about? Well, you're a Christian, so you hate gay people. I was like, oh, hun, you've known me for a really long time. That's not true. So again, those assumptions and those assignments, it's really hard to show up in your authentic self. So again, you have to guard those values, know what they are, figure them out. And that's going to give you, help you usher in the legacy you're intending to create, as opposed to the one you're going to accidentally create if you aren't intentional.
Yeah. Before I ask you about where people can find you on the internet, if they would like to connect further, why do you think bad things happen to good people? Because one of the things that I'm seeing out there today is people can easily fall into a victim mentality, and sometimes it is warranted, and other times it's just easy.
That's for sure. I'll give you two great examples. In my own situation, I was in a series of abusive relationships, and the last, of course, being the worst. And the reason why I'm bringing this example to light is you just said, it was easier to be a victim. It was easier to say, these guys are just bad guys, which that's true. They had their own demons and whatnot. But if the bad things did not happen in that order for me, if I did not get to that breaking point in that last final really bad relationship, I would not have stopped to go, okay, maybe there's something I am choosing wrong. Maybe I'm in a pattern that I need to recognize. Maybe there's something and they say, whoever they are, you marry your father. My father was an addict. So when I found myself in relationships with addicts, I felt like, well, that's what they say. Like there's no way I can break that. It's absolutely easier to be a victim. So I needed bad things to happen to me to wake me up and make me pivot. And the very next relationship I entered into was with my husband, who's a completely different man than anyone I ever dated. I have no idea why he married me, because I was a completely broken, crazy. I was like, it really worked out for you. I got myself together in the end. But so that's a personal story. But in the Bible, there's a great story.
I just want to say love changes people. Keep going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The love of Jesus changes people too, right? So Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Some people know him as Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, but Joseph went through a very lengthy list of things that went terribly wrong that were not his fault, being sold into slavery and, being accused of adultery that he did not do. He was always doing the right thing and getting the wrong, terrible accusations and thrown in prison and whatnot. In the end, he was positioned as the second in command of Egypt in a coming famine on the land. And God positioned him in that place to reconcile with his estranged family and to save the nations around him. So he recognized in that moment, all of this happened for a reason. It had to go this way, because if I was just got along with my brothers all my life,
easy.
Yeah, it would be easy. And I would have never been in the position of second in command in Egypt. I had to have been sold as a slave to even get to Egypt. And, he just continued to hold his integrity and stay focused on faith. And God used him to do all of these amazing things. So to answer your question more simply, there's purpose in it. It's hard to see it then when bad things are happening. And some things are really, really bad. I don't want to minimize. There is tremendous trauma that happens to people. So I understand that is hard. And sometimes we don't see the purpose or the plan on this side of eternity, but there is purpose and a plan. I actually did a podcast entirely based on that one question with a good friend, but that's a deep one. That's my simple answer. There's lots of potential directions you can answer that question.
Very nice. Very nice. What's the best way that someone could reach you?
I am at gainingmyperspective.com. That's the best place. I had to kind of pull myself out of the social media death spirals, as I called them. I was like, this is going so badly. So gainingmyperspective.com, my podcast is there. My book is there. My devotional is there. You can email me there. All the things I do wind up there. So that's the best spot.
Very cool. So just to wrap up, thank you for speaking into how God and faith in Jesus Christ can be an ally, to be a source of strength, be a source of hope to designing one's legacy, that money matters, but money is not everything. And I think that with, all the surprises in the world today, in our life, that there are resources available. Maybe our eyes can't see them. We can't see faith. It's kind of like the wind blows, we see the effects of the wind, but I just appreciate that you're standing strong in what it is you believe in, because I don't think it's easy for anyone to speak to their beliefs, but especially if they're countercultural today in the year 2022.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just read out my closing paragraph, and Let's just, okay. So in closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder of the Legacy Planning. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content of this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity, as well as spiritual today. Thank you for joining us. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. And thank you so much, Wendy, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.